Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring thankfulness, and how it connects to this idea of redemption. We're going to hear some pretty vivid stories today about redemption. People who were lost and found both literally and spiritually.
Yeah, and I think what's so powerful about these stories is they remind us that even when we feel completely lost, there's always this hope for a second chance, a fresh start.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're going to be diving into Psalm 107. It's this beautiful piece of writing that paints these four incredible pictures of redemption. Each one shows God rescuing people from some really tough situations, and then this just overwhelming sense of gratitude that follows. You might even find yourself, you know, connecting with these stories in a personal way as we go along.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is that each of these scenarios in the psalm follows a similar pattern. You have this desperate situation, then a cry for help, then a miraculous deliverance, and then boom, this beautiful call to respond with thankfulness. It really highlights how recognizing God's hand in our lives, especially when we're going through tough times, it just naturally leads to a heart that's overflowing with gratitude.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the first picture. Wandering. Imagine people lost in the wilderness, right? Thirsty, hungry, completely disoriented. They're at their wits' end, their strength is failing. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like those times in life when you feel like you're searching for meaning and purpose, but you're just going in circles.
It's that feeling of being spiritually adrift, like you're trying to fill this void, but nothing seems to work. But the psalm reminds us that true satisfaction, that deep sense of belonging and purpose, can only be hung in a relationship with God. It's like finding your way back to a city after being lost in a desolate wasteland, a place of refuge and provision.
And that's when these wanderers finally cry out to God, right? They admit they're helpless, and they beg for his intervention. It's this raw and honest moment of surrender.
And what's amazing is that God doesn't abandon them. He hears their cry, and he leads them out of that desperate situation, guides them on a straight path to a place of safety and provision. It reminds us that no matter how lost we feel, God is always there, ready to guide us back to himself if we just call out to him.
It's like he throws us a lifeline when we're drowning in doubt and despair. But the psalm doesn't just end with a rescue, does it? It emphasizes that this experience of being rescued should lead to a profound response.
Absolutely. It's all about cultivating a deep and lasting sense of gratitude. It's not just this fleeting feeling of relief. It's a conscious choice to acknowledge and appreciate God's goodness in our lives, even when we don't fully understand his ways.
Sometimes I think we can get so focused on asking for help that we forget to just pause and say thank you for the blessings we already have.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to take things for granted, isn't it? But taking the time to acknowledge even the small things can make a world of difference in our outlook and our relationship with God.
Okay, so we've explored this idea of wandering and finding our way back to a place of belonging. Now let's dive into the second scenario from Psalm 107, which is even more intense: imprisonment.
Yeah, this time we're not talking about being lost in like a physical wilderness, but trapped in a different kind of darkness. Psalm 107 describes these people who are imprisoned in these like horrible conditions, probably because of their rebellion against God. Think like squalor, disease, heavy chains. It's a pretty powerful metaphor for how sin can bind us and weigh us down.
It's like being stuck in this cycle of bad choices, feeling trapped by your own mistakes and unable to break free. You ever felt that? Like you're longing for a way out, but the doors are locked and the bars are unbreakable.
Exactly. And just like those wanderers, these prisoners hit rock bottom. They realize they can't free themselves and finally cry out to God in desperation. It's this raw, vulnerable plea for mercy and deliverance.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Despite their rebellion, God hears their cry and responds with this incredible compassion. He like shatters the doors of bronze and cuts the bars of iron, setting them free from their physical and spiritual prison.
This reminds us that God's grace is bigger than any mistake we could ever make. It's that powerful, transformative love that breaks the chains of guilt and shame and offers us true freedom. But it's not just a passive experience, it's a two-way street.
I was just thinking about that. We have to be willing to acknowledge our need for forgiveness and accept the freedom he offers. It's like he throws open the cell door, but we still have to choose to walk out into the light.
You're absolutely right. The psalm calls us to respond to this incredible act of liberation with genuine thankfulness. It's about recognizing that we didn't earn this freedom, it's a gift, and that makes it all the more precious.
So if you're carrying around burdens of guilt or regret, feeling trapped by past choices, remember this. God specializes in setting captives free. He's waiting for you to reach out, to surrender those burdens and embrace the freedom he offers.
That leads us to the third picture of redemption in Psalm 107, sickness. This time it's about people suffering from these terrible illnesses, possibly as a consequence of their actions. They're physically and spiritually drained, unable to find any comfort or relief.
This reminds me of how sin can affect every aspect of our lives, not just spiritually, but emotionally, mentally, even physically. It's like a poison that seeps in and creates this disharmony in our whole being.
But even in their weakened state, these people find the strength to cry out to God. And once again, he responds with compassion. He sends his word to heal them, bringing restoration and wholeness to their broken bodies and weary souls.
This highlights the power of prayer and God's word to bring comfort and healing, even when we're facing the consequences of our own choices. It's like a soothing balm that soothes our wounds and helps us to start over.
And again, the psalm stresses the importance of thankfulness. It's not enough to simply receive healing. We're called to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving, to express our gratitude through words, actions, and even songs of joy.
I love that. It's like we're invited to celebrate the victory of God's healing power in our lives. But how does this apply to someone who hasn't experienced like a dramatic physical healing? Does everyone have a reason to be this thankful?
That's a great question. Sometimes we can focus so much on the big miraculous healings that we miss the everyday ones. Think about like a moment of peace in the middle of a stressful day, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, or even have the ability to breathe deeply and appreciate the beauty of the world around us. Those are all signs of God's healing touch in our lives.
You're so right. Maybe sometimes it's not about looking for the grand sweeping gestures, but noticing the quiet, subtle ways God works in our lives.
Exactly. And when we shift our perspective to focus on those smaller moments of grace, our hearts naturally overflow with gratitude. And that, I think, is the essence of what Psalm 107 is trying to teach us.
Okay, so we've seen how God rescues people from being lost, imprisoned, and sick. Ready for the final picture of redemption? This time we're heading out to sea.
This final story from Psalm 107, it's all about these sailors who are caught in this furious storm. I mean, imagine these massive waves crashing over the deck, the winds howling like a wild animal, and the ship is just getting tossed around like a toy boat. It just paints this really vivid picture of how life can sometimes feel totally chaotic and out of control.
Yeah, we've all faced those storms in life, right? Those times when everything feels uncertain and overwhelming, like a health crisis or a financial setback, a relationship falling apart. It's those moments when we realize that despite our best efforts, we're not really in control.
It's humbling, isn't it? And the psalm shows us that even experienced sailors, the ones who think they know how to navigate the waters, they can be completely at the mercy of a storm. It reminds us that we're all ultimately dependent on something greater than ourselves.
And just like in the previous scenarios, these sailors reach this point of utter despair. They realize their own strength and skill just can't save them. And they cry out to God for mercy. There's this beautiful reminder that even when we feel like we've messed up or made the wrong choices, we can always turn to God for help.
And you know what? God responds. He calms the storm, stills the waves, and guides the ship to a safe harbor. This image, it speaks volumes about God's power over nature, but it also points to his ability to bring peace to the storms in our own hearts and minds.
It makes me think about those times when I felt completely overwhelmed by anxiety or worry. It's like those moments when you finally surrender your fears to God and this sense of calm just washes over you.
Exactly. And that's the amazing thing about God's grace. He doesn't just rescue us from physical storms, he offers us peace in the midst of our inner turmoil as well. But as we've seen throughout Psalm 107, it's not just about receiving the gift of rescue, it's about responding with a heart full of gratitude.
Right. The psalmist tells us to thank the Lord for his steadfast love for his wondrous works to the children of man. It's about acknowledging God's faithfulness and celebrating his goodness, even when things haven't gone according to plan.
I think there's a powerful lesson here for all of us. It's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and forget to cultivate an attitude of thankfulness. But when we intentionally focus on the good things in our lives, even the small things, it shifts our perspective and it fills our hearts with joy.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Psalm 107, I want to leave you with this challenge. Think about those storms you've weathered in your life. Those times when you felt lost, trapped, sick, or overwhelmed by life's challenges. And then take a moment to reflect on how God showed up for you. Maybe it was a dramatic rescue, a quiet whisper of comfort, or simply the strength to keep going.
And as you reflect on those moments, remember to offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving. Share your story with someone, write in a journal, sing a song of praise. Let your gratitude overflow and be a source of encouragement to others who might be facing their own storms.
Because ultimately, that's what Psalm 107 is all about. Recognizing God's faithfulness and responding with a heart full of joy and thanksgiving. And that, my friends, is a recipe for a truly fulfilling life. So keep exploring these ideas, keep seeking God's presence in your life, and until next time, may your hearts overflow with gratitude for all the ways He's rescued you.